Hi, this is Randy Randall of No Age and host of the podcast Hyphenate with Randy Randall. I want to welcome our newest sponsor of the show, DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and artists keep 100% of their royalties. Hyphenate listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/HYPHENATE. Go get your music streaming everywhere now.
We would like to celebrate our friends and supporters over at isotope.com, fine makers of audio software for repair, mixing, and mastering. You know their goods: RX10, Neutron 4, Ozone 11, Nectar 4. Chris and I love them, we use them, and we know you'll love them too. Go to isotope.com and check it all out. And to get your discount, use code FRET10 at checkout. Again, it's izotope.com. Please enjoy your day.
Yo, what's happening? Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, download, streaming Hyphenate with me, Randy Randall. It is a pleasure to be coming to you on this beautiful Thursday, the third Thursday of the new year, January 2024. It just feels unreal. 2024 is happening. New year. I'm still writing 2023 at the end of anything if I have to put the date on something. But I figured by February, hopefully March, I'll have that figured out. 2024/24 at the end of all dates will now be ingrained into my brain. I'm really excited. Today I have my very good friend Andreas Trolf on the show. He is an incredible writer and all-around kind of jack of all trades. You know, I think in a different era they'd be called a Renaissance man. Now I think he falls, very nicely, neatly into our hyphenate category. What is it? One of us. I'm trying to think from Freaks, Gooba Gaba. One of us. I think the Ramones also took this saying. But Andreas is awesome. So I met him. He was a writer. I think that's primarily what he does, and I think his main creative sort of focus is his writing as a fiction writer. And then I think he took that and kind of pivoted into filmmaking animation. So I first met him under the auspices. He had a cartoon show on Nickelodeon about 15 years ago called Sanjay and Craig that I think he had written with the artist Jay Howell doing the designs and also creatively, putting it together with him. And and Andreas had approached myself and my bandmate in No Age, Dean, about doing some music for the show. And it just seemed really odd at the time, but I was also a new father, so it seemed a little bit more up my alley. Like, oh, it'd be kind of fun to do a kids show music. And there were these twins or triplets or the neighbor kids on the show that looked like kind of like the Ramones. They had all black hair in their face and leather jackets. And Andreas first came to us and said he wanted music that sounded like G.G. Allen or some kind of skinhead sort of oi punk band. And so we recorded these really weird, I guess not, pretty straight ahead punk songs, blistering and loud and noisy. And thinking they were like demos, like, oh, cool, if they like them, then we'll, record it. It was probably cleaner or something somewhere else. But in hindsight, I've come to sort of figure out, I think we were just a little too punk for what they were going for. But it was really fun. So anyway, that's where I met Andreas, and he was also riding and building motorcycles, which was also interest of mine around the time. And friends through lots of mutual friends that were skateboarders, and he ran a small skateboard company, Good Grief. He may still run, and then we did a music video for this other music project I was doing called Rat Fist. Andreas directed the music video. So I've just known Andreas sort of in a creative, mischievous cohort sort of context for a lot of years. Like, hey, I have this idea. Like, hey, you want to work on this thing? I'm trying to do this thing. I'm trying to do that, and I think there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think that's always the one thing, I think living in LA and doing weird creative stuff or being friends with weird creative people is, you never know what's going to happen, where there might be an opportunity for some fun, strange things that maybe never get made, but you have a fun time putting the pitch together, or you build the thing, or you shoot the thing, or a short film. Oh, I did music for a short film he did. So I really just love Andreas all around. I think he's been a great guy. He is a great guy, as you'll hear in a minute. But I think our topic, if I remember, or our talk, it just kind of meanders a little bit, sort of like this intro. But I had a lot of fun sitting down talking with him. I don't think I officially called out anything that he did or what qualified him as a proper hyphenate, but I would say somewhere between, author, filmmaker, skateboard company owner, motorcycle builder, in this general milieu, a pot of creative badassness is where Andreas comes to us from today. So I want to thank Ruinous Media for having me on, the company, the channel, the team, the crew. Been having fun. Third episode for 2024 in the bag, and I will be back on Monday with Aaron Farley to talk about Andreas. So hang in there. See you on the other side. I'm still learning what I'm doing here, so I'm trying to make all my mistakes with friends. that way it's like when I get to people, like, oh shit! I just figured out I had Toshi Kasai, who records the Melvins. He's a neighbor. He lives up here. Awesome. He told me, he's like, oh yeah, you're using the wrong mics. Like, I just had him over last week. And so it's those kind of things, like, okay, I want to have friends in here. He's like, oh yeah, that's the wrong mic. You should be doing it like this, this, and this.
Oh, that's
like perfect. Okay, that's what I need to do.
Information.
Yeah.
Rad.
Cool. Okay, so you're talking into that. Can you
All
just
right.
talk?
How's my levels? Am I too close? Too far? What am I popping?
No, I think you're good.
Pop, pop, pop. Hello.
Yeah, and I think it's great.
I've been seeing so many of those "keep honking" bumper stickers, and your son one. They're so good.
Yes. that was perfect.
Everyone in like East LA has the Alice Coltrane ones on their cars,
yes, right? And there's like that record did not sell that well. Like,
no,
most people did not own. More people own those bumper sticker than actually own
the album. Yeah. It's hilarious.
Oh, I know. I love the format. It's just gotten more esoteric and like just kind of long paragraph long diatribes.
Yeah. My favorite one that I've seen is "How am I driving? How does an engine even work? Why would a loving God allow such pain?"
It's perfect. Yeah, the existential sort of like bumper sticker crisis. Oh, I feel like the world of like beyond irony is like just, it's surpassed into this like metaphysical kind of psychedelic, culture.
Yeah. I think the idea of irony is really weird.
Ooh.
Because we went through the ironic 90s, right? Like everything was tongue in cheek, like from literature to comedy to TV to all of it. Like it was in a way like almost cruel, because like you don't even know if you are being serious anymore. And then we got to the post irony in the early 2000s, and like, I don't know, especially in literature, there was like new sincerity, it was called, right? And now we're in a place where nothing is nothing or everything is anything, right? Like in the same sentence or in the same like bumper sticker, it can be ironic or super sincere or just completely Dadaist and like
even the idea of the bumper as a place of like, you know what I mean, where of a history of like displaying some kind of slogan. You know what I mean? It's like it almost doesn't exist in the bumper sticker idea anymore. It's a tweet, or it's something else in this other kind of way. Like there's not, I'd say bumper stickers in 2023 are closer to a tweet than they are to then some kind of expression of like, protest or something. It's
well, I mean, I think it's a funny thing, right? If we're talking about it in terms of like wanting to like showcase a little bit of who you are, your personality, right? What you've got behind you is like a captive audience for 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the freeway or stuck at a light. Yeah. Like somebody's going to see it. And like, I always appreciate somebody's like a little thoughtful, like, but you're right. In terms of it being a tweet, it's like, it's a witty utterance, right? Like if so, but
I found, it's funny. Yeah. I don't know if you can see them. I have some paper ones, like, actually from I think these are from the 70s. I found them at a vintage store.
No way.
Is there a date on it? I I can't even read. But you know what I mean? Just the old paper ones. Like I was gonna put on something, and he's just like, it's paper. It'll just dissolve as soon as water hits it. But again, it was like
a political slogan right there.
Yeah, totally. There's another one like, do your thing, but don't touch mine.
Yeah.
Like, sure. That's could go on a shirt or a bumper sticker. That was kind of the idea. Like, you know.
And I wonder how those were like, how people wanted them to be perceived at the time, like in the 70s. Is it like, do you want someone to get a kick out of it, or like take it seriously as food for thought, or a little bit of both? I don't know. I think like throughout there was such a premium placed on seeming cool,
right?
Like the in aloofness. The 90s and 2000s, yeah. And maybe that's just our generation. Like we went through that phase, right?
Right.
Like when we were in our 20s and 30s, like again with the comedy or literature, where like irony rules above everything. Like the aloofness, like you're saying, where caring about shit is lame.
Right. Well, it was like David Letterman. You know, he represented a whole kind of point of view of like, is he serious? Is he joking? Does he care? Does he not care? Like, you don't know. And that was kind of the fun of it. I also think about The Simpsons, the Homer Palooza one, where it's, you know, like Homer goes to Lollapalooza and it was sort of a take on the Gen X just aging out, you know, and it was like, I forget what it was. So it was like Otto and a few of the other kind of 90s.
Is this ironic? Like, I don't even know anymore.
Right, yeah.
It was like the dude in the audience with a mohawk and...
Right, oh, yes, right. Because it was Homer getting hurt he was part of the Jim Rose, like, circus freak show. Like, do I like this? Like, how do I like this? Does it even matter how I like this? So this is,
and I think there's another aspect, too, that's interesting to discuss because it asks more of the audience, right? And, like, I'm not defending irony by any means. Like, I really dig sincerity, but also, like, I'm a comedy writer. So, like, it's like this floating thing, right, where, like, you have to decide from moment to moment whether or not somebody's being serious or not. Whether someone's being serious. And so like you're asking more of the audience, like to be more engaged. Like, how do I read this person? Right. Like, like the history of comedy, like thinking about it, or I mean, not that I'm just a comedy writer, like, or also not to disparage comedy writing in any way. Right. But like you can be perfectly sincere with a veneer of irony or a veneer of aloofness. And you're asking your audience to kind of parse from moment to moment what you mean.
Right, and it's so much to do with the history of the character, or how well you've defined that character in as little strokes as possible. Yeah. You know what I mean? You don't have a long time to give it a whole backstory, but whether it's a look, a casting, a costuming, you know, setting for the character, and then based on what you bring to that character, that idea. But again, I think. And we're going to get into your biography in a minute, but I'm having way too much fun talking about this because this is stuff that like bubbles around in my brain. The theory that I ascribe to, I didn't make it up, but I'm not smart enough or have enough time to do research on things. But I feel everything's so hyper niched. You know, there's not a monoculture like there was. You know, we're men in our above 40s, and there was that we grew up in a time where there was a water cooler, a literal water cooler, a monoculture. There's the 3 networks, this kind of thing, and so everybody would see the movie that weekend. Everybody would see the Star Wars or would see the comedy, and then everybody would watch Cheers. You know, and then. And what that represented was, you know, a kind of, for better or worse, you know what I mean? There was not a lot of people represented. Representation was not a priority. Diversity wasn't a priority. But there was just kind of this blank slate that everybody could almost fill in their own blanks. It became more of an abstract sort of viewing, you know, as a viewer. You would say, oh, that's kind of, Carla's kind of like my aunt, or Norm's kind of like my dad, or this, you know, you'd have to draw these things you didn't.
Like you're overlaying your own meaning, your own systems of meaning on this stuff, even though like that's not the intention maybe. Right.
But just even the idea that men and women every night went to a bar socially. Right. And some of these people had families, you know what I mean? And again, you know, Simpsons is kind of my tabula rasa for so much, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Same here.
You know, young white men of my age. So I've started showing it to my 9-year-old son, and I just was shocked, especially in the early seasons where it's like, Homer's at a bar every night. I've never gone to a bar, you know, we're like, sorry, family, I'm going out to the bar to drink with my friends tonight. And then everyone's smoking, but they're also going to church.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to a bar every night, and I'm not going to church every Sunday. Like how different my generation is than the generation we grew up in.
Yeah, exactly. It's also not meant to portray our generation exactly. Like if anything, when The Simpsons came out, we were Bart's age.
Right.
You know, it came out in 1988 on the Tracy Ullman Show, 89 when it was a series, right? we were Bart's age.
Yeah.
So like our dads maybe did. Like this is meant to portray the generation that like, or even it was Matt Groening, right? Like Homer and Marge are his parents. So it's a generation before even.
Wow. Yeah.
So we're thinking suddenly like, is this the 60s? And also, like, The Simpsons is meant to essentially be, like, portray all the tropes in a modern setting from the tropes from the Flintstones. So suddenly it's the nuclear family of the 50s. You're like, you can keep tracing this back in this kind of, like, weirdly recursive thing. It's a show made in the 80s and 90s, and unfortunately still today, made in the 80s and 90s about the 50s and 60s or 70s, right?
Yeah.
And what they're parodying are like the tropes and lampoons of Matt Groening's childhood and then the childhoods of the writers. You know, so like when we're seeing this as kids in the 90s, there's so much that went over our heads, right?
Totally.
I don't know who Rory Calhoun is, even though the dog is walking and talking. Like,
it's like that feels like a very Conan O'Brien joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Like, and these are people that are a generation or two older than us.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think there's anything more formative to my sense of humor or even worldview than The Simpsons. Right.
Well, it's taken on this whole predictable, how did The Simpsons predict 9/11? How did The Simpsons predict, the flu? And the reading is they were a Dadaist absurdity that was just could only come about because the world had only become more absurd.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Do they represent like a sort of holding up a mirror to the world? Or is it right? Like, does the world become more absurd as our comedy or like our popular culture moves in that direction? Right? Like, people say they predicted all this stuff, but like, it was a joke when Lisa became president and said like President Trump left us a real budget crunch. Yeah, right? That's a joke because it's the most absurd thing the writers could come up with at the time. Right. And then the world, evolved to like meet that, and we're fucked. We're stuck in a loop of irony. Right.
Well, yeah. Back to irony. Right. Yeah. Right. Irony rules everything around me. Due to new not cream. Irene. Yeah. Okay. So Andreas.
Yes, Randy.
Who are you, and where do you come from, and what do you do?
Okay. Well, first of all, awesome to be here. I should preface it by saying that. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
My name is Andreas Trolf. I'm from New York. I live in LA now. I'm a writer. I write fiction, and I guess more relevance to this. Like, I do TV stuff, mainly animation. What else? I write stories and books also, but I'm a skateboarder. I have done like a cool skateboard trivia night at bars with my friends. That's real fun. I used to play in a dumb band that only like 12 people from New York know about. But mainly I'm a writer and skateboarder and enthusiast of life, I guess.
Life enthusiast.
Yeah, that's another hyphen.
Yeah, motorcycle mechanic.
I flatter myself by saying that I could, I'm not a bike builder. I would never elevate myself and put myself in the category of some of my friends who are real builders. My buddy Zach Castelli, he's a real builder. Max Schaff is a builder. Jason Ferris, like these are people I look up to and know through skateboarding, right, who are bike builders. And Max helped me build my first chopper. And I'm eternally grateful for the stuff that he showed me and helped me do and did himself while I just watched like an idiot, not knowing how to do anything. And then, like, little by little, I've learned to do that myself, but I don't flatter myself and call myself a builder.
Yeah,
I love motorcycles.
But you can keep it on the two wheels if it's falling over.
I can do.
You pick it back up
I mean, mostly with old Triumphs, which are like not as popular as HD like Big Twins or something. But I love old Triumphs.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So a lot you laid out there. So growing up in New York, I'm curious, where did skateboarding sort of fit in? Like, how did you first kind of come to skateboarding? And I'll ask you also about writing as well. But I'm curious what your skateboarding journey was.
I think like most people of our generation, like maybe I saw it a little too young, but Back to the Future, like that's the most common thing, right? Yeah. Like if somebody is a tiny child in the 80s and they see Marty McFly on that Volterra board, right? I think that's a pretty common. Like a common origin story for dudes in their 40s.
Yeah. Do you know where that Burger King is?
I don't. Is that?
Oh my God! It's here. Victory, right in Burbank.
No
like if you get
way.
off on Burbank Boulevard and make that left, there's a Burger King on the right there, right by there's a Hobby Lobby and an AutoZone.
You know exactly where it is. I didn't realize it was the same.
It's that same Burger King.
Nickelodeon is not far from there.
Exactly.
I just buy there like every single day.
Yeah.
But like a lot of people, I saw that movie and thought like, what the fuck is okay skateboarding, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then like I begged my mom, my brother and I have a little brother, and we begged our mom for skateboards, and like we got little garage sale boards for $5, and they happen to be plastic banana boards, and
Yes.
not adequate, but you're a little kid, you figure it out. And then we got department store boards, and then I think for my 11th birthday, so like squarely a kid of the 80s, like a little kid in the 80s, or no, that must have been like 89, yeah, like 89 or so. We went to a skate shop for the first time, and like growing up in the area of like Far Rockaway and Long Island, like where that intersection is, it's like beach territory.
Okay.
So we grew up on the beaches in New York. Like I don't know, most people would probably be familiar with the Ramones song Rockaway Beach, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's like
Yeah.
the closest geographical spot to where we grew up. And there was like the skate shops there were like surf shops. So we'd go to like a place called Sensations, right, where it was mainly surfing, and they had like a small wall of boards. And I got a Tommy Guerrero flaming dagger, and my brother got a Rob Roscop,
Yes.
like the screaming face. And he quit after a few years, even though he was like the most talented skateboarder I knew, like a fearless little kid. And I just kept up with it. And then like you start seeing, like around that era, was like when Shut was the biggest thing ever. Shut skateboards.
Yeah. Well,
right?
it's
Like,
that transition then from big wheels now into like popsicle boards.
no, this
No?
was even earlier. Like
Okay.
Shut was like, and they came back. There were several incarnations of
Okay.
Shut, and it morphed into Zoo York eventually.
Right. I'm thinking of Shut. It was kind of like the Ever Slicks and stuff. They were new to that, weren't they? Or no, am I totally
You
wrong?
know what? I don't know that Shut ever did Everslicks.
Okay.
But what they did have was an amazing team that like was groundbreaking. Sean Sheffy and Coco Santiago rode for Shut.
Okay.
Chris Pastors, who I'm friends with to this day, like these guys were the dudes we looked up to. And specifically like in New York, the type of skateboarding that existed there was like the precursor to modern street skating.
Yeah.
And like you would go to like my first experience with skateboarding was in like this surf shop where like some guy named Grom set up this guy's board, like Grammy, I don't know, trying to do like some dumbass surf language here. I
Sure.
apologize for that because
Yeah.
surfing's rad, but and I went
If
surfing.
you've
yesterday.
ever been a skate kid going into a surf shop, you know the vibe. Yeah.
But it's two different worlds, right?
Yeah.
When you have like urban street skating that's on the ascent, right? And like this sort of surf skate thing is like a relic of the 80s when it's like white dudes with like sun in their hair, you know, and like wearing Mad Rats.
I can't imagine what the surf culture in Far Rockaway was. I know surf culture from California.
Yeah.
But surf culture there.
Well,
it's probably,
I don't want to say it's too different. It was still like largely a white thing.
Of course.
And
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
but where this intersection of skateboarding and surfing was like, there was street skating was this antithetical offshoot, right? Like in the same way that like metal suddenly said, yeah, we're based in rock and roll, but we have no blues in our music.
Right.
Like we want to do the thing that's the opposite of blues based rock.
almost became classical or something.
Yeah,
You know,
like,
these guys doing
it has to be a new
Mozart
thing.
or Bach, figures on the guitar just to get away from
Exactly.
the Robert Johnson kind of influence. Yeah.
Like street skating was
Yeah.
like wanted to be antithetical to surfing at that age, and I think it like stayed that way through it, like through it's pretty recent history, and like Shut became Zoo York, and then there was this whole East Coast like ascent of like East Coast type street skating, right? And that came up through the 90s, and Dan Wolf's videos, like the Eastern Exposure videos, like were super formative to all of that. And then I just like kept skating, and it was like a street skater in New York in the 90s and 2000s. And I mean, and that's still like, there's like a robust, like super robust, like East Coast skate scene. Like that's in a way, like I think a little different from anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there was, as a kid, probably a couple of years younger, I mean, we definitely, it was a whole new world. San Francisco had its own style. New York had its own style. Growing up in Southern California, obviously there was, a million spots and it was almost a smorgasbord of things to skate here.
Yeah.
But again, anything that it's like we want the other thing, and so like watching those videos and kind of like seeing coverage, of people at the Brooklyn Banks, it was like, whoa, what is this?
That was the
It's
most
wild.
formative spot for me in my childhood, like starting from age 13 to I want to say like through like into college. Like I went to college in New York, didn't go far from home, but like I spent an unhealthy amount of time at the Brooklyn Banks. And I remember growing up thinking like, oh, if only we had skate parks, right? Like you were saying,
Yeah.
like I imagine growing up here saying, oh, those Brooklyn banks, if only we had that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we would go to like, Huntington Beach High School. They have the skate park on the corner, and then you get into the schools too, and then you see all those, that was well documented territory for that time. But the first time we went to New York, I remember we stayed in Chinatown, and it wasn't far. I think we were driving by like, well, that's a Brooklyn Banks. We gotta stop and we gotta see it. But it really sticks out. It's funny, the Jamie Thomas part in
Welcome to Hell.
Yeah, that's the one. I mean, he's not exactly the local guy, but
no, but he's skating the big banks.
But he was
skating the rail. And,
that was huge. That definitely cemented the Brooklyn Banks.
Well, he was also one of the first guys to skate that rail. Like there's the 9-stair rail at the Little Banks that I remember distinctly being in junior high, and my friend called me up and said, like, the Plan B guys there's a contest this weekend at the Banks, come by. And and there's still footage from that, like that contest that you see online, and it was pure chaos. There were hundreds of kids holding up traffic so people could ollie over from the banks over the wall, tagging buses. Like I remember seeing, like, being right there, a little kid when Danny Wayne nose slid that rail. Whoa. And it blew my fucking mind.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then it was years later, like 96 is when Welcome to Hell came out, I think. And this was 93 to 96. Wow. And like the sort of seismic leap or the quantum leap, and like from, somebody nose sliding a 9-stair rail to do in a line, doing a back 50 down a 12-stair, like skating.
It exploded. Those 90s, that street skating.
Like the realm of what's possible, even in that era.
Yeah. Yeah. And how far were you going with it? I mean, were you online or in line to kind of, get sponsored or getting flow from shops, or where was your journey like with skateboarding in that way?
I mean, I think the first person to give me a free board was this guy, Greg Chapman, who owned Chapman Skateboards. And before that, it was number 9. He gave me a number 9 board when I must have been like 14 or 15. Whoa. He worked at a skate park on Long Island that we would beg our mom to drive us to when it was raining and snowing. And so he gave me a free board, like a couple number 9 boards. And then when I was in high school, Jeff Clint, who was part of Real Skateboards at the time, he gave me a couple of boards, would send me flow boards.
Whoa.
And then
the dream.
Yeah, it was amazing. I took a trip out to San Francisco, and he took me to all the spots. And rest in peace, Jeff Clint. That dude was a major positive force in skateboarding and really helped me out when I was a kid. And then I rode with a bunch of my friends for this company called Rookie Skateboards. They were fantastic, like a female-owned and fronted company, and most of the team riders were women, just absolute rippers. Jessie Van Rookout and Jamie Reyes, but also Tino Razzo and Sean Kelling and John Klein and Shane Mednick, like bunch of rad names that in skateboarding, particularly on the East Coast. But Jamie Reyes, everyone knows who she is. Yeah. And Rookie was the coolest company. And we would take trips with the New York guys, combined tour, go skate a demo together. And that was for me, my favorite era of skateboarding, except for now. I think now I'm having more fun skateboarding than I ever had as an injured, 40-something year old,
So cool. So then from there, you said you go to college. Is that where writing sort of became a thing, or was writing happening more? Tell me about your kind of journey with writing.
I think I came to writing in a very roundabout way. And I'm a little ashamed to say it. I wasn't a reader because and I don't want to shame my parents or anything, because different people do different things, and there's no one right way to be as a person. I don't think,
Sure, yeah.
But my parents weren't readers. Neither my mom or my dad, and books were not valued in our house. And again, that's fine. I learned all sorts of other things from my mom,
Yeah.
But books were not a thing for us. Reading was not, again, prioritized. And I think I got into reading, and this is funny, maybe more people of our generation found reading through skateboarding. I remember there were in skateboarding, a lot of people were into books, particularly Julian Stranger. I remember him talking in an interview about reading Bukowski and Camus. Right. Whoa. And Julian was always
some heavy name drops.
Yeah, exactly. Especially for a 16-year-old kid. Yeah. I go, okay, yeah, I'll check out Bukowski. This seems chill. Or a Camus book.
Whoa.
And I started getting into reading that stuff, especially Bukowski, which is the stuff you should read as a teenager, and then like find better writers in your 20s, and like don't get stuck.
Don't stop
here.
there.
Yeah, do not stop with Bukowski or John Fante. Even like move on.
Yeah.
But that's what it was. Like I read Ham on Rye and I read The Stranger at like 16 and 17, and I thought to myself, like, fuck, this is like the last thing I read for pleasure before being a 16 or 17-year-old was like the Chronicles of Narnia. My uncle gave me the series of books when I was like 12.
Which again, that's the right age for that.
Yeah,
You know
it's
what I mean?
the great age, but there was no follow through or follow up. There was nothing beyond that.
Right.
That I was given
the Bible.
to read.
I think the Bible is supposed to come after that.
Yeah, right. Like, oh, you're already Christian, like doing Christian proselytizing here. Like, yeah, you're C.S. Lewis being a weird Christian. Like, now here's the Bible.
Yes, yeah. I think that's the precursor. Yeah.
But then I didn't go to school for writing at first.
Oh, okay.
I went to school at first for math, and then anthropology, and then art history. I stayed in school for a really long time. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship. And I definitely tested the bounds of like acceptable behavior of keeping a scholarship, where I kept saying every semester, like, again, this is a huge privilege. I have to start with that to get to go to school for stuff that interests you.
Oh, God.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's like, I'm sorry to get all political right away, but like there's a huge push, especially by the far right in this country, to demonize education, and particularly demonize kids who want to go to school for something that interests them, something they're passionate about. Like they say, go to school for fucking practical applications, you know, like get an education that prepares you for the world. And I'm I'm part of that cohort of people that get to go to school or got to go to school for something that they loved.
Yeah.
You know, and I eventually centered on found writing through just like trying stuff. And I got more and more into reading, and then like maybe I could do this. I thought like this book really touched me in a certain way or evoked a feeling. What if I tried doing that?
Amazing. And is that I mean, and not to draw too fine of a point on it, but I mean, I imagine the way I look at life through the lens of skateboarding was always it was a dialogue. Like you'd see something and then you'd want to go try it. It's like see, copy, or see and iterate. And, you know, I wasn't thinking about it that obvious in that kind of way, but there was a lot of inspiration involved in like any kind of skate media. It was not a one-way street. A lot of skate media that I consumed, whether it was magazines, videos, that got me so pumped, and all the energy you have as a teenager all balled up and like we watch this video to get stoked, and then we're out in the streets immediately, and that's almost our dialogue response to that. Is that something that you carried through into other areas of your life as well? I mean, it almost sounds like, you know, reading something and then being inspired in that.
I think you're absolutely right. Like in terms of consuming skateboard media, that being a dialogue, it's not this one-way flow of information, right? Yeah. Or, I mean, it was less in a way than is today, because everything's online and we can communicate with people.
Absolutely.
But even then, like I think skateboarding, if you want to go so far as to call it a sport, which I don't necessarily subscribe to that. It's a lot of things.
We're not going to see you from the front seat of the Olympics.
Well, I mean, I mean, you can make a case for that.
Sure.
Like I had a long conversation with a good friend of mine who's an art historian about whether or not skateboarding can be considered art.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it can be. I don't think it has to be.
Yeah.
But I think saying that it isn't or never can be is a really like a dangerous corner to paint yourself into.
Yeah.
I think skateboarding is in many ways performative, like dance. And in many ways it's also choreographed. Like you think of a line to shoot, like to film in a video, like each trick is connotative, right? It's a reference, right? A meta reference to people who came before you, to other skateboarders who did, like there's the terminology in skateboarding like ABD's already been done, right?
Yeah.
Or people know, like they have this exhaustive like spot lexicon, right? Or trick lexicon, or like people like, and this came back in like when I was doing like skate trivia with my friends, right? Like there is a whole contingent of people out there who have an encyclopedic knowledge of spot, song in the video, trick, the shoes you were wearing, everything about that. And I find that super, super interesting, because essentially what skateboarding is, like, in my opinion, right? This is not meant to be universal or anything. I don't want to speak for anybody else. Skateboarding is a conversation and it's a navigation of your environment. And I think when you see someone doing that in a magazine or a video, especially like in our generation, we were kids, there's no internet, there's no way, you can't like tag your favorite company in an Instagram clip and say, check me out. But what you can do is you see someone in a video and you aspire to like say like, and you know at the time like these tricks are being done a year or two ago, right? And they've already evolved again, right?
Yeah.
But when a video comes out, you see somebody like a really formative part, especially when I was super young, like like we were talking about Ray Barbie earlier.
Yeah.
Like seeing Ray Barbie's Powell parts.
Oh yeah.
And going like, what? Like this is a navigation of an environment. And he is traversing this environment in a way that's like super stylish, incredibly technical, and just also fucking fun.
Yeah.
Like
Feels like it's off the cuff. Like he's
Yeah.
just coming up with those ideas there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was tricks are still being, I guess, invented. But at that time, like, I think the early 90s, like that was, you couldn't even call it a renaissance. You call like, this was the period in which people were inventing things for the first time.
Yeah.
Street skating was on like being invented like day to day, like not just Ray Barbie, but Nodis and Gons and people of that generation, like late 80s, early 90s, they were inventing the lexicon as they were going along. Like every single day, I imagine, for them was something where they realized a new thing was possible.
Yeah.
And like seeing that, you want to try that, or to the best of your abilities, right? Like you want to get close to that. You see like video days. Right. And like, I think that was the first video that really blew my mind as like a cogent skateboarder. Right. Like I would watch Powell videos again, but like watching Ray Barbie and going like, what the fuck is he doing? But then it took another year or two for things to really click for me because you're a kid. You don't know really what's going on. But I remember watching video days for the first time. And like Guy Mariano, a kid like around my age, right? Thinking like, oh, he's a little kid. Like what the, like, nose blunt sliding a curb. He's what is he doing? What are these tricks?
Yeah.
Right.
Took it to a whole new level.
Yeah. And then you like, I think the question you asked, sorry, like to get back to that in a roundabout way, like you see it and you want to do it. And then you develop your own lexicon, maybe. You incorporate some of these things. And then what you're doing is another iteration of what's possible on a skateboard or what's possible for you. And then like with writing, I think, like in skateboarding, you have to be aware of what's being done. Like, who's really pushing the boundaries of the form, like, particularly in fiction. TV is another iteration of that or another animal. But, like, I would talk about fiction now and saying, like, every generation, like, somebody comes along and is that generation's person. And everybody in, like, an MFA writing program wants to be, you know, a Raymond Carver or wants to be, like a George Saunders or more to the point, like, God, my brain is all over the place. Like, you know, Tessa Moshfegh, who is like the more recent darling of MFA programs, and I love her writing. But like people will read that or read like a David Foster Wallace. He was the person of his generation, right? And you push the boundaries of what is considered possible or what fiction means, even. And in the same way, like skateboarding, like you see someone pushing those boundaries, and you want to imitate that. Before you can do your own thing, you have to imitate and
find
have good
a voice
taste before you find your own voice.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. How did you find your voice, and what was your process to coming to writing as an interest and then into an actual job? I'm gonna fix your mic real quick.
Oh, sorry, Randy.
No, you're good.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Excuse me. You tell me when you're ready.
No, okay, yeah, we're good. Yeah,
all right.
So coming into from a course of study and something you're doing for yourself, and then coming into a job, how did that happen?
Well, studying fiction and creative writing in school, actually had a long conversation with one of the heads of like the MFA program about like I mean we're skipping ahead here, right?
Sure, yeah.
But I had the opportunity to do a pilot, and that's why I moved out here. And
tell me a little bit about that. Like, what's that experience like?
Did you want to go back and talk about voice
Oh,
stuff? Or like,
yes. Sorry.
I'm sorry to like go all over the place.
You're right. Sorry. No, that's my bad. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to go back, I think finding your voice is like, it's not only an ongoing thing, but I think the first step of finding your voice is finding out what appeals to you. Like with anything, like with music, right? Like, how did you decide what No Age sounds like?
Yeah.
How did you decide what song feels like you?
Right.
You got to like a ton of stuff first and have good taste and develop like a fluency in that medium.
Yeah.
Or if not a fluency, you at least have to figure out what appeals to you, and then you try stuff. And like most people, like I didn't pick up a guitar my first try and write a song, but I did pick up a guitar and try to learn how to play like I would love to play this Rolling Stones song, or like more to the point for me, like I want to learn to play guitar like television. Right. And like, I can't write a television song, but I can learn how to play like Tom Verlaine,
The notes have already been written. You just have to play those same notes, which is just not an easy task.
No, absolutely not.
That's picking
No, I mean, that's high-end guitar nerd shit.
Yeah.
But also like with literature, right? Like I'm reading the work of like someone who is at the very top of what they're doing, like who is at the highest part, the highest summit of what it means to write literature. Right. And like, as long as I can recognize that, I can't do it yet, but I can at least recognize the good stuff. And I think having good taste is the first step to doing anything, or having taste, at least picking a direction.
I like that.
Right. Because you can't be good at something right away. Your first 50 attempts at something are going to be failures. Like the first song you ever wrote, was it good?
No,
they're shit.
Terrible, yeah.
The first story I ever wrote was bullshit. It was awful. I look at it now and it hurts me. Right? Like,
but I did like good bands. So which I see what you're saying there. Like in just getting yourself like immersed or well versed in the medium.
Yep.
Because that's the thing that pains me as a person who's played music for all these years, is I will see a band. And the worst thing is when they try to sound like somebody that's not good.
Yeah.
And it's like the skill set. I get it. I don't expect anybody to have great skill, but when you just go like, ooh, that's your North Star.
Yeah.
You're pointed towards this thing that's kind of been warmed over dog shit for the last like 30 years. And you're going to go after that one. Like you didn't even really dig. There's a lot of records out there you could have gone towards. And that's the thing that's more painful than anything. Like good taste or bad taste or whatever it is. It's like skill sets will develop. You'll develop those over time, but taste, you're not that you're born with it, but you kind of have to.
You have to develop it somehow, and like find it within yourself, right? And like I think there's not enough conversation, and maybe this is me overlaying my own cultural biases on something, but like I think there's really a conversation to be had about like what you like versus what the popular notion of good is, right? And like I think skateboarders, to like bring it back, like we, especially people of our generation, like we became skateboarders because we weren't popular. Skateboarding was at the time the catch-all, right? If you're a reject from this, if you can't be on a baseball team, if your home life sucks, you find refuge in skateboarding. You find refuge in punk rock, right? And that is a place to go, like for a community that is like-minded, right? Like you find acceptance because everybody else is fucked up just like you are. And suddenly you create this whole new category of what is cool, right? And it's just like, I mean, I hate to like draw this really tenuous connection here, but like when a neighborhood is cool, right? Like we were talking earlier about like where to live, right?
Yeah.
Like you move into a shitty neighborhood, maybe. Sorry, shitty is like a value judgment. I apologize for that. But you move into like a neighborhood because it has like cheap rents and you need all the money you have to do your art. Right? You struggle to pay rent, but like rents here are cheap and you can do your art, you can do your music, you can be a skateboarder without a job. You can do all these things, right? And then like years later, someone moves into that neighborhood because it's quote considered cool, but they're coming in with money, right? And suddenly like people are priced out, like the people that have lived in these neighborhoods for a long time, even before us, right? We're like, in many ways, like we were part of that wave of gentrification as like white artists, right? But before that, like you've got a whole generation earlier in the 70s and 80s who move in, who want to be artists. Like, I mean, look at New York in the white flight era.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, but sorry, I'm like really going off on a fucked up tangent and I apologize for that. But like, figuring out what your tastes are.
Yeah.
Is a big
first
deal.
Step.
Yeah. And also like what is considered broadly popular, even niche popular, right? Like what is critically acceptable, right? Or critically lauded. Like these are all like somebody's value judgments, and then that becomes sort of like the overarching or like sort of like the broader cultural judgments of what is good. But like there is a conversation to be had for like genre stuff, right? And like even when like I think there's something good to be found even in like bands or music that I don't necessarily like, but like people do like the even shitty music in our what we would call shitty music, or like shitty writing. Like my dad reads 1,000-page books about fucking submarines, and they're like clearly awful. Like Clive Cussler is bullshit, but he sells 100 million books.
Yeah.
Right. But then you start like talking about like, is it good because it makes money?
Right.
But I
Which
think,
is a cultural sort of conversation in general. But have been developing your own voice. There's you. I think as an adolescent, the idea, or as a newcomer to a place, you want to reject all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Reject all popular stuff till you
Absolutely.
drill down into something that you feel quote unquote is real.
Yeah.
Right. This is the real thing. And then as you get older, you're confident in your position, your point of view. Then you can start to bring in all these things that are considered more of the culture, the populist sort of culture, because you have to
Absolutely.
address them. Because otherwise you're a tempest in a teapot, and you're not talking to a larger culture. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Honestly, but I think you're right.
You have
You
to be
drill
confident.
down on something, and this becomes your thing, right? And like I'm as guilty of it as anybody. Like when I first started taking fiction writing seriously, like I really, really wanted to be George Saunders, like in a like really bad way, or like wanted like, or even earlier, like I was reading like bad fiction, before I developed my own tastes, like I thought Charles Bukowski was cool.
He
right?
is, yeah.
Yeah, sure. But also like in the same way that you're 18 and you want to read Ayn Rand.
Ooh, right.
And
yeah.
it makes you into an asshole for 2 weeks. And it should, right?
Yeah.
At 18, you should. But then if you're an adult still reading Ayn Rand, there's probably something wrong with you.
yeah.
But
There's a
like,
maturity of
yeah. But then finding your own voice becomes like this real process of like winnowing out and winnowing down things. Like I'm influenced by X, Y, and Z. How much of that goes into my writing? Or, I mean, it's a thing called the anxiety of influence, right? Like painters, are they painting in like too much of a style of this painter, or a musician? Did I take this chord progression from somebody else?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. There was that.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to bring it up, but that Ed Sheeran, like a court case this week about whether he ripped off the chord progression from "Let's Get It On," right? Like, and I mean, that is a whole other conversation, right? Or how you skateboard, right? Like, like. I was having a talk the other day, and I hope I'm not monopolizing this and talking too much.
Oh, no. Are you kidding me? This is it.
But like, thank you.
Yeah.
But I was talking with a friend of mine about like this skateboarder, John Shanahan.
Okay.
And he's a New York guy, and he rides for this company called DGK, and he rides for DC Shoes. And he rips. He's so good. But everything he does is calculated to reference skateboarding in 1997.
Wow.
Like he wears giant cargo pants with one pant leg pulled up and a wind jacket, and he does these tricks that are like references of what was done in a by someone in a DC ad in 1997. And I really like his skateboarding, but he's referencing something. His skateboarding is super hyper referential in the same way like somebody's writing or music could be hyper referential.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a Greta Van Fleet is like, is a great example of that today. And the question then goes like, is there a value to that? Because it takes skill. It's certainly not. It's not without skill, and it's not without reference. Having a voice and knowing a thing. It's like, it gets back on the thing of like, parody, homage.
I mean, those are porous boundaries, right? They're floating.
Like, well, that's what we started talking about. The post-irony. Like, what does it all mean,
Exactly. I had this conversation, and this is years ago. Angela Boat, right?
Yes, yeah.
The photographer
She's
who's
great.
like a dear friend. I absolutely
awesome.
love Angela and her work and everything. But, like, Angela is a metalhead.
Oh, yeah.
She knows more about metal than anyone I've ever met in my life. And I'm a fan of metal. My knowledge pales in comparison to Angela's like obscure knowledge of metal.
Yeah.
And years ago, this is in New York in the early 2000s. I remember like there was this band at the time called Diamond Knights. Do you remember them?
No.
They had like a big hit in the early 2000s called That Girl's Attractive or something like that. And it was everywhere for one summer. But they had this other song that sounded to me exactly like, brain again all over the place. Thin Lizzy, a Thin Lizzy song.
There you go.
They had this
Not
one
a bad
song.
thing to reference.
No,
a great band,
but
right? Yeah.
I remember Angela and I were hanging out one time, and the song comes on, and she goes, "Is this some kind of fucked up Thin Lizzy B-side that I've never heard before?" And I went, "No, like I'm pretty sure it's this band like trying their best to write a Thin Lizzy song." And Angela immediately went, "This is bullshit." And I respect her for that because, why would I like not just listen to Thin Lizzy?
Yeah. But I feel like there's something about that conversation that you have with your culture or with your, it's about, I like Thin Lizzy and I like people that can reference Thin Lizzy. So it's it's a question of like it's ownership, and again, it's that fine line of homage.
But is
versus,
it intentional, right? I think you got to ask yourself
of course, right? You'd assume
like homage is. I think an homage implies that it's on purpose, that it's an intentional thing.
Right.
But are you setting out to write, quote, a Thin Lizzy song?
Yeah.
Or
Right.
like-
Well, it's funny. Yeah. One of my favorite Bell and Sebastian songs is they reference Thin Lizzy in the song, and it has a bit of this like kind of dual harmonized kind of guitar thing. And again, there's almost something because your genre skipping, your genre bouncing. You wouldn't expect a twee sort of indie band like, Bell and Sebastian to reference, Thin Lizzy, but because by doing so, there's something about the irony of it. If you're a metal band or 70s kind of pastiche band and you cover a Thin Lizzy song, it's almost like it's an easy reach or something like that, right? So there's that kind of thought of purpose or the intention, right?
Yeah.
The intention of the artist.
But like Bell and Sebastian doing that is kind of like a great example because they're doing it in a very specific way. Right. Like I think the average Bell and Sebastian fan is like just a music fan, right? Because they're like, I feel like anyone who listens to them today is a real fan, like, and understands more about music than a lot of people because it's not pop music anymore. Right. And they're not super popular in this like era, or even like all that often cited as like an influential band of the 90s, even though I think they are. But I think you specifically, or even like, I'm a fan of Bell and Sebastian, and when they put a Thin Lizzy reference and a Thin Lizzy riff into a song, they're doing it because they know their audience would go like, ha, yeah.
It's that conversation.
Got it.
Yeah. But I think that's so much of it, right? It's having your own voice and then referencing others in a way of acknowledge tip of the hat sometimes, or of a certain kind of conversational sort of way, and knowing what your audience knows as well. There's this kind of 360 sort of way in which an artist or a creative person can sort of, tap their audience by way of like, check this band out. You would like this band, but also not just being so across the board. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is when someone does a cover and it just sounds exactly like the original.
Oh yeah,
because you're like, well, that doesn't need to exist. The original exists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think something has to be said about Gus Van Sant's Psycho remake, where it was so bleedingly intentional to do this
shot for
thing.
shot,
right? But with some glaring. Departures that weren't shot for shot at all. But why? But that called into question. There was an intention of the artist, like why would anybody need to do that? And then you see, the reboots and the reheating of whatever. Whenever our culture ran out of ideas 20 years ago, and now we've just been treading on this kind of rehash.
Well, it becomes like conceptual art, right? Like it's the idea more so than the execution. Like, why would I want to listen to Tom Petty's version of "I'll Feel a Whole Lot Better When You're Gone" rather than the Byrds version? Because it's the exact same song. He recorded it in the exact same way that the Byrds did. And then like I wonder why. Did he enjoy it? Did he do it just for himself? Or was he trying to introduce a new audience to the Byrds?
Right.
Or like an example in literature, like Karen Russell is a really famous fiction writer, and I think she's super talented, but her first book was just like pure pastiche ripoff. It was called A Home for Girls Raised by Wolves, I believe it was called. I'm misquoting that, of course, but like I read it and thought like, oh, cool, I get who she's riffing on. Like I get this, right? And then like as her career progressed, like she developed more and more of her own voice, but you can still see like this anxiety of influence there.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah,
that's a good term. Anxiety of influence.
I mean it's like that's a term in like the philosophy of art of like none of us are like outside of this sort of like sphere of influence of other stuff, right? And when you try, like specifically when we're talking about voice, right? How much of this and how much of that do we sort of internalize?
Right. And it almost becomes like your sieve or your like mesh. They like anything that can come in. I felt very humbled and also very happy with the fact that I realized like, as I try to play someone else's thing, my skill set is not such that, I could recreate, Keith Richards' guitar line exactly the way he would do it.
Yeah.
And there was a certain sort of like, oh, but I do it my way.
Right.
Wink, wink, quote, meaning I'm not as good, but I have a certain set of skills. I have a Liam Neeson sort of thing. I can do things in just this particular kind of way. And so I'm going to call this my quote unquote version of this song. And I never wanted to acquire the same skills that he had, but I love the song so much, and I was going to do my punkest, DIY-ist, most whatever best job that I could do of that time of recreating that energy or putting that kind of thing back out there. And so I always felt like there was a certain amount of like, oh, I'm going to take that reference. Oh, I've been listening to the song, or someone told me about this song. I'm like, I like that. I'm going to bring that into practice. Yeah. Just the feeling of that, and play something in the style of. And then by the time I get done with it, and then Dean does something to it, and then we record it, it sounds completely different.
But that's like the value add,
intentionally doing it. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
The value add of like doing a cover is your reimagination of it, or your sort of rearrangement of it. Yeah. It becomes like the song itself becomes the raw materials. Right. Yeah. It's no longer just guitar or drums or bass or vocals. Yep. You're using those taken from a specific source and rearranging them in a way that you find pleasing, or like that brings something new to the song. Yeah, accentuating I admire the shit out of that. Yeah,
accentuating what you like, and pushing to the background stuff that like, I can kind of skip that lyric there. I don't know if I have to hit that one.
I mean, that is like a great just sort of thing to think about in terms of like a broader issues of or topic of pastiche, right? Like collage or cultural pastiche, right? Like you're using like. There's so much in the world of like modern art, for instance, that like is just pastiche. Yeah. Right. And I admire it. And there's a conversation to be had about like, again, like anxiety of influence is like, I hate to keep like coming back to the well of this term. And
it's good.
But like, it's a conversation you have to have with yourself all the time. Whenever you're creating something new, and like, I think you and I are like in similar sort of in similar worlds in terms of like you're like creating a new album. I'm trying to write a book or make a TV show, and you have to first think to yourself like, what is the thing that I can do that no one else does? Am I just doing a remix? Am I just doing like a cover of something that's already out there, or am I really trying to do something new? And like that's an ongoing conversation you have to have.
And imagine every step of the way, there's a new opportunity because I mean, talk to me a little bit about the process of, making TV shows. You've made a few now, and every step of the way, a new voice or a new collaborator gets added. Sure. And that's for good or bad, or hopefully all for, the sum of the bigger than the sum of the parts. Everybody adds something that's better. Oh yeah. Whether it's a producer, an animator, a voice cast, editor of music, it all kind of adds up into something that goes beyond your first thought, and hopefully there are things you could never have thought of, and for the better.
That's the best case scenario. Yeah. Like, because I think TV and film, more so than anything I've done in fiction or in, other aspects of my life, like it's collaborative in a way that few things are. I imagine, like being in a band performing at your highest level, that's super collaborative. But in TV, it like, and not to value anything higher or, than anything else, but it was a skill I had to learn, like the collaboration. Like you think you have this singular vision, right? Like everybody's sort of, you walk this fine line as somebody who makes stuff, right? Where you both think that you're a rare singular genius and you're totally worthless. And like the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but you have an idea and it gets filtered through all these other people. And in the best case, everybody brings something to that makes it better, right? Yeah. Like working, whether that's a co-writer, a producer, a director, an animator, and like you said, like even voice actors, like we go in like and do, and like get these performers, right? These actors who are like the best at what they do. Like I've been really lucky enough to work with super talented actors. And even when they bring in and read your words that you wrote, like they'll have suggestions or they'll do an inflection that's a certain way, and suddenly it changes everything. Or even you and I, when we've had the opportunity to work together and have done, like you've done the music for 2 of my projects, or 3 actually, 3 with the short film. Oh yeah. Yeah. But every time like we've started talking about what this means and what it should be, you've come back to me and say like, hey, have you considered this? And like, cause you are super, super good at what you do. You're very talented. And no, I'm not like blowing smoke. You just are. But it's come back and I've said like, oh, I hadn't considered that. And you've made something better. And in the best case scenario of like a TV show or a film, everybody that touches it makes it better. And in an unexpected way from what the original conception of it was. And I find that super valuable.
Oh, well, you're too kind. I'm still blushing over here. But But yeah, what a wild way to be creative, to be inspired enough to come up with an idea and have this vision, and then you got to hand it off. It's like almost like having a child. Like,
Yeah.
I love my baby; it's so precious. Now I need the next 10 people to just go ahead and take care of that baby for me. You got to pass it off. And you give it to a daycare and let it have a runny nose over there.
But also, like, you got to trust a teacher.
Yeah.
Or trust anybody that child comes into contact with. Best case scenario, they're giving something to your child that you can't.
Yeah. Well,
or that you're
right?
less equipped to do, right? Like,
absolutely.
I have not studied, this topic, right? So somebody who, like, and that's a broader cultural conversation about, like, the idea of expertise, right? But, like, with TV, like, I mean, that's my area of expertise for, such as it is. But, like, I can write something and then I hand it off, and, like, an animator maybe has a slightly different, or storyboard artist has, like, a slightly different idea of what I've written than, like, what it is. And, like, you have to learn to trust, right?
Yeah.
And delegate and do all this stuff. And when it is really firing on all cylinders, like, somebody will make your idea better because it suddenly is not just your idea. It's your idea plus their idea plus this idea plus that. And then it does become, again, in a way, a pastiche of the tastes and talents of all these different people. And when that works together in, like, the way it's supposed to, like, you get really lucky and you make something that you could never have made on your own. And collaboration is amazing. And, like, you learn the other valuable skill you learn out of that, before we move on and I shut the fuck up, is that, like, you learn to take your ego out of it. And that is, like, the most important lesson I think I've learned in this process, is the best ideas come from anywhere. And take your ego out of it, and, like, occasionally sit down and shut up.
It's so, it's, I mean, it reminds me a lot of, of being in a band, right? It's that you have you bring in your part, however you write the song, and you're going to hopefully sit down with a drummer who's you're going to take it somewhere you could never have thought about. You can add a beat or lyrics or whatever your thing is, or you're adding to something to that soup, and then you go to record it, and hopefully the recording engineer or the producer or the studio, they're all adding up to this thing that, again, you just had that little tiny germ of an idea. So you get the credit for that, but you can't take the credit for everything else that happened beyond that.
Right.
Despite whatever the writing credits say, you'll reap the rewards or sink the ship, if it doesn't go well. But it's also, there's so many people that you could either credit or blame.
Yeah, that
depending which way it
reminds
goes.
me of, like, a Johnny Cash story where he would have all his session guys like sit in while he was trying to write something. That way he could give them all writing credit.
Oh, wow.
And
it's very generous, right?
Yeah,
that's
that's not
huge.
just generous; it's fair.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, cool. You come up with, like, a lyric and a guitar riff, right? If you're Johnny Cash, right? Probably, like, operating in the highest echelon of what he does, but he's not going to do it without another guitar player or a drummer and a bass player, right?
Yeah.
And they have added something to that process.
Absolutely.
And it's only fair to give them writing credit.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that thing always bogged my mind. Always came from the band world, where it's like, how's there just one name on this thing?
Right.
They didn't play, unless you're Prince. You didn't play everything. You know what I mean?
The rare exception.
There are a few hyper geniuses like that. Yeah. Well, I feel like we've talked for so long and we have not really scratched the surface at all.
Yeah,
I still don't even know what. So I still don't know what you do. I remember I asked you in the beginning, what do you do?
What
is this?
How
does this work?
conversation is, right? We go on these weird tangents, and then it gets recursive, and we talk about the same thing from different perspectives for an hour.
Yeah.
But sorry, I cut you off.
No, I don't know. No, I feel like we've beaten up culture. We've chewed it around and passed it back and forth for way too long, and I could do this 10 times longer. So
absolutely.
I've had a lot of fun. Is there anything you want to shout out or anything as we wrap it up? I forget where we're at here. What are you working on? What should people be looking at?
I'm in this weird spot of, like, and maybe you've been here too, where like you're tied up with NDAs at the moment.
Oh yeah. Okay. So things aren't there.
And
but
that's a wonderfully privileged place to be, where you have stuff in the works, and I've been really enjoying doing what I'm working on right now.
Okay.
One of which is a cool movie that I'm excited to talk about more. But
you'll have to come back when these things are available to talk about.
To.
Yeah. But do you want people to follow you places, or what do people do?
I don't care if they do or if they don't. If they get something from this conversation and want to reach me, I don't know. It's just on social media. I'm at Andreas Trolf. Or you can look at andreastrolf.com if you want to see TV stuff or read any of my fiction. It's there. But I don't know. that's always such a weird ask for me.
Of
like,
course.
like check me out. Like,
Or don't.
Yeah. Like if I have a upcoming TV thing, like please watch because we need the ratings.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's like my personal brand is not a personal, I don't know. Yeah. It's just, I'm just some idiot that likes to post pictures of like a skateboard spot or like a book I'm reading. And if,
yeah, is that really for public consumption? If it is, cool. If not,
yeah.
Well, I love the sticker you gave me, the skate or don't, in the style of skate or die.
Yeah,
I feel like that perfectly sums up your point of view on that.
Oh, yeah.
Of self promotion, like, hey, I worked really hard, designed this thing, printed it, paid money, got all this stuff out there, just so. And I want you. I'm really enthusiastic for you to have it, but the overall sentiment, like, it's cool.
It goes back to our bumper sticker conversation,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Here's a thing that somebody took the time not only to make, but another person took the time to put on their car.
Yes.
And like, what do you hope to get out of that? And I think.
Oh yeah, I have it on my road case here. That sounds like bullshit to me.
Oh yeah,
right? Yeah. I put all the stickers up on all my
awesome.
cases that I took
should have
all
brought
over the
more.
world.
I'm sorry.
No.
But I think the highest praise I could get, honestly, or what I hope to get out of anything I do, is for the people I like and respect, like you.
Oh.
Like look at it and go, that's funny.
Yep.
Or like I like that, and that's all I need out of the world, right? Is for like the people I like to like the stuff that I like or do, and then because I appreciate what you do. Like whenever you play music or like put out something, like I check it out and go, fuck, this is something that somebody I care about took the time to make, and like not only took the time to make, but took the time to do right and to make it in such a way that they're proud of it and they want to share it with other people. And when you work on something and you want to share it, it stops being just about you, and it becomes a conversation.
Absolutely.
And that's what means a lot to me.
Yeah, I do. I totally respect that. I can totally relate to that. Thank you so much. Thanks, Andreas, for being
thank
here.
you for having me. It's been an
man.
absolute pleasure, and I'm so hyped to see you.
Awesome. Thanks. Yes, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend. Andreas, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. That was incredible. It was really good to see you and to catch up. And thank you everybody for tuning in and for spending another perfectly good hour of your time, just wasting it away. That's all we're doing here. It's a pleasure to do it together, though. At least we're not alone. We are wasting our time simultaneously, and that's something good. That's something I can get behind. So I will see you on Monday. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye.